TwinCities.com. We're back with Jeff Blixt, Inspect a Home. Did I get it right?
You did that fantastic.
Better
yeah.
Swedish. Yes.
Absolutely.
Inspect.
You betcha.
Gonna inspect a home. President of Inspect a Home.
Homes.
Inspect
With an
a
S.
More home,
Inspect
one.
Inspect a Homes.
Homes, yes.
Okay. InspectAHomes.com. And I know that Jeff likes to hunt elephants as opposed to mice, and that is related to your philosophy of inspecting homes. Maybe you could kind of illustrate that for us. What are you talking about there?
Well, I think when I say that phrase, what I'm talking about is we're looking for the big ticket items. We're
Okay.
not necessarily concerned about the really little small things. And I think one of the things that I see from my viewpoint is that people's expectations of what an inspector does are not always in line with what our standards of practice tell us that we are doing or what we should do. And trying to educate the public on what inspectors do, what they don't do, what's part of a general home inspection, what is something that's outside of a general home inspection, how invasive is it, that really becomes critical in really that person's long-term satisfaction with that inspection.
And that's part of what a good real estate agent does as well, is set up the inspection process.
Right.
I'd like to mention that, I've been working with Inspect a Homes for many years. One of my favorite inspectors is John Haven. We've just done dozens and dozens.
John's a great guy, very knowledgeable.
Yeah, and he's got a home pretty close to our lake home up in Chisago City.
Okay.
So, Swedish town there.
Yes.
But, yeah, and I've just been thrilled with your company, the service, the pricing. And when it comes to the different types of inspections, I don't think that the buyers really realize what's involved in doing the general home inspection. Then there's a radon inspection, there could be a mold inspection, several different types, but each one takes more time and it takes more money. And so, that's part of the message that we need to be good at getting across.
I think if people understand what we do and their expectations are clearly defined, I think it just helps everybody in the process. And
Tell us, what can folks expect?
Well,
what are the gap between what you find some people are thinking they're going to get and what they help give us the myth versus reality here.
Okay. People think that I'm going to have an inspection on my home, it's a warranty, it's a guarantee, I'm never going to have a problem. And that's not the case.
Okay.
When we're out doing an inspection, it is essentially visual. We're not going to move personal property. Number one, if the seller comes home and they find that we've moved a bunch of their items, that usually results in a phone call to the listing agent and I hear about it. So we typically don't move personal items. We're not opening up walls, we're not pulling cover plates off. With the exception, we will open the electrical panel to look to see how everything's wired, make sure that it's wired properly and that the breakers are matched up with the appropriate type of wiring or size wiring, that type of thing. And we do look in the furnace and or boiler, whatever it may be. We do pull the inspection covers off that, operate it, look to see how it's running. But essentially, it's still a visual inspection, and there's just some things we can't see. I can't see interior walls. A general home inspection, we typically don't get into adequacy. We don't know if when that furnace operates, is it going to heat the entire house adequately.
Okay.
And the other thing that comes into play is as different homeowners come and go, they use that home differently. And one of the things that we've seen that I'm going to start encouraging highly on older homes is sewer scoping. Because we have situations where maybe a retired couple is living in the home and have been for 5 or 10 years since their kids moved out, and they've had limited use of their laundry facilities and so forth, and all of a sudden we get a family moving in that's got 5 kids and they're taking a lot more showers, they're using that whole system differently, and they start running into problems.
And that's a huge expense, boy.
It
I
certainly
have
can
seen
be.
that happen where somebody moves in, that sewer line needs to be replaced, and that can be up to a $15,000 fix.
Yeah, it's not a quick
not
fix,
cheap.
and
Right.
it's not cheap.
Yeah, so I think that's great advice.
And the problem with it is for a home inspector, when we run water in all the different fixtures, I mean, we're very good about wanting to see if there's leaks, that type of thing. But what we can't replicate is I can't put lint down the laundry drain, I can't put food chunks down. We can't operate that the same way you would as if you're living in the home. We can mimic some of it, and we certainly find a lot of issues when we're doing that, but we're not going to find everything.
So the value of a home inspection is like to find the big stuff, the glaring, the obvious, and then maybe you point people in the right direction, like, you might have there's no elephants, but we did find a couple potential mice.
Well, and there is no perfect home. We can go into a brand new home and we can find issues that weren't caught by the contractor or the builder while they were doing it. And in most cases, that's a very positive thing because the builder wants to know about that. Yeah, it's still generally, it's a visual inspection. We're not opening up walls, we're not probing walls, doing that type of thing.
Right, and one of the things too that I like to review with my clients is when they're buying a home, if it's not new construction, they're buying that as is. And it's not gonna be a new home.
It's a used home.
It's a used
And
home, there's gonna be
Pre-owned.
issues that go on with
There's
that.
a certain amount of liability that you're taking on for things that you don't know about. And
Right.
while I think most sellers are very good about filling out that disclosure, having done arbitrations for a number of years, it's my feeling that while most sellers are very honest about that, if you live with an issue long enough, it kind of becomes a norm, and you don't think
it's
about.
a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't think about disclosing it.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
Right.
Well, the other issue too is when something gets disclosed from an inspection, the seller has to disclose that on to the next buyer if this first buyer doesn't work out. So
And that can be leverage, right?
yes, so if something comes up, let's say radon, and the seller's not happy about what they have to do to mitigate that radon, well, you can't just pretend that you didn't know that the test came in high at that point. You have to do something.
And now you actually do have to disclose that if there has been a radon
Exactly.
test in your home. That's a new law
Exactly.
that went into effect this year.
Yeah, let's talk about radon a little bit and how that has changed for you. You said that your tests went up like 275%?
Oh,
Is
they're
that right?
just off the wall. A couple of things happened. One, I had put a class together on radon. I have a 2-hour continuing education class that I've given to real estate agents over the last year. And that in conjunction with that new disclosure requirement, I kind of tell the story last January. I went into the office right after New Year's, and typically, I always tell people our business from about Thanksgiving until Super Bowl, not a lot happens. And so I'm going in there to do some things, and I looked over where we keep all of our radon monitors, and every one of them was gone. And I went out to my receptionist and the scheduler, and I said, where are all of our radon? They're all out. We got flooded with calls right off the bat. And that whole thing has kind of continued throughout the whole year. I think I've got 20 monitors, and they're out
All the time.
all the time, yeah.
And that's really something that, as real estate agents too, we need to be having that conversation with the buyers, because if you get to the property and there hasn't been a discussion about doing a radon test, and then you're talking to the inspector about it and they don't have the equipment with them, that
Right.
means another appointment coming out, and our inspection periods have a time limit. And so we could end up having to ask the seller to give us more time to get that inspection done.
Exactly.
Because now we need to have that radon kit sitting there for 3 days?
It's 48-hour test typically.
48.
48 hours, and part of that includes we want to have that home closed up tight for a minimum of 12 hours prior to testing it. And there's a number of different reasons what come into play with what they call dynamic equilibrium within the room and how radon decays and so forth. I don't know that you want to get into that
Well, I
part of
think
the detail, but
one of the things we should talk about is, why is radon important?
Right.
What is it? How does it
Well,
impact homeowners?
and I like to give the perspective that have for many years been concerned about carbon monoxide poisoning. We now have a state law that requires you to have a carbon monoxide detector within 10 feet of the sleeping room. Now, the drawback with that law is we don't know whether that means through the floor, through the wall, through an open. It's not a very well-written law from my point of view, because it's just open to a lot of ambiguities. But the reality is that we have all this protection against carbon monoxide poisoning, and on a national basis, I believe the numbers come in somewhere around 500 people a year die of carbon monoxide poisoning, which is a significant amount. I mean, it's still an issue. But in comparison to radon, they've literally linked 21,000 deaths to radon per year in the United States. Second leading cause of lung cancer. So it's a phenomenon, it's
Wow.
a natural occurring thing. There's nothing you can do to prevent it. We can control it, and that's the whole idea behind mitigation. And I think it's just one more thing that we're becoming aware of in our environment that for many years we weren't aware of. In the classes I teach, I've had a number of agents come up to me after the class, and we talk about neighbors or friends or relatives who had died of lung cancer, who had never smoked, done all the right things, exercised, had eaten well, done all the things that we're supposed to, and still had lung cancer, and never thought about the ramifications
It
of
could have been.
possible radon exposure.
Could have been radon.
Yeah, and radon, it's really no different than going to the doctor and having too many x-rays taken.
All
It's
right,
the same
well-
type of radiation.
We're going to come back and finish our radon conversation with Jeff Blixt. I'm Eric Purius on RealTalkTwinCities.com.